Station Orion 7 floated in the darkness of space like a silver flower. It was far from any planet, far from any sun, and far from the busy trade routes where ships moved like ants. This was a quiet place, a place for creatures that had nowhere else to go. Like the quiet. She stood in the feeding area of Enclosure 17, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. In her hands, she held a bucket of raw meat. The smell was strong and bloody, but after 18 months, she did not notice it anymore. "Breakfast time," she called out, her voice gentle and warm. "Come on, Bobbies, come eat." From the shadows at the back of the enclosure, three shapes moved forward. They were large, larger than any Earth predator had ever seen. Their fur was dark gray, almost black, and their eyes glowed yellow like small moons. Each one had claws that could cut through metal and teeth that could crush bone. They were the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. Every species feared them. Hunters, scientists, and soldiers had all tried to study them, capture them, or kill them. Most had died trying. But these three walked toward like puppies greeting their mother. Dory came first. She was the eldest, almost 4 years old now, and she moved with the careful grace of a hunter. But when she reached, she lowered her massive head and pushed it against the human's chest, making a soft, rumbling sound. "Good morning, big girl," said, scratching behind Dory's ears. The predator's eyes closed in pleasure. Bora came next. He was the protector of the group, always watching, always alert. He circled around once, checking for any threat before sitting down at her feet. His tail swept across the floor. And then came was the smallest. She had been sick when first received her, so thin that her ribs showed through her fur. The veterinarians had said she would not survive, but had stayed with her every night, feeding her by hand, sleeping beside her in the enclosure when she cried. Now was healthy and strong, but she had never forgotten those early days. She loved more than anything in the universe. The small predator bounded forward and nearly knocked over with her greeting. She licked the human's face with her rough tongue, making happy chirping sounds that seemed strange coming from such a deadly creature. "Yes, yes, I love you too," laughed, trying to keep her balance. "Now let me feed you before you eat me instead." She distributed the meat among the three cubs. They ate quickly but politely, never fighting over food the way Wild did. Had taught them to share. She had taught them many things. From the observation window above, watched with all 6 of his eyes. The administrator had managed this preserve for 30 years. He had seen many strange things, but nothing was stranger than watching a small human woman play with creatures that could kill her in seconds. "She is remarkable," said a voice beside him. Turned to see Commander, the human who ran the station's security. She was a tall woman with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "She is foolish," replied, his mandibles clicking. "Those creatures are not pets, they are weapons. One day they will remember what they are." Shook her head. "You don't understand humans very well, do you? I understand that you are soft, weak. Your bodies break easily and your lives are short, yet you insist on forming attachments with everything you meet." Santini twitched with disapproval. "It is illogical." "Maybe," said, "but look at them." Below had finished feeding the cubs. Now she sat on the ground with her back against the wall, reading from a tablet while the three predators arranged themselves around her. Dory lay on her left side, Bora on her right, and had placed her massive head in its lap. They looked peaceful, content, safe. "They killed their last 3 handlers," pointed out. "Those handlers treated them like animals," replied. "Treats them like family. There's a difference." Did not respond. He did not believe in differences when it came to predators. But he had learned long ago that arguing with humans was pointless. They always thought they knew better. Below noticed a blinking light on her tablet. A maintenance alert. One of the atmospheric processors in the adjacent enclosure was malfunctioning. She should report it to engineering. But engineering was slow these days. Half the station's systems were old and breaking down, and there were never enough workers to fix everything. Decided to check the problem herself first. Maybe it was something simple. "Stay here, Bobbies," she told the cubs, standing up carefully so she would not disturb. "I'll be right back." She walked to the connecting door between Enclosure 17 and Enclosure 18. The door was thick, designed to keep different atmospheric conditions separate. Enclosure 18 housed a species of crystalline creatures that breathed methane instead of oxygen. Checked the control panel beside the door. The readings looked normal. Maybe the alert was a false alarm. She stepped through the airlock, making sure her breather mask was secure. The moment she entered Enclosure 18, she knew something was wrong. The air was hazy, not with methane. The crystalline creatures had been moved out months ago, but with something else. Something green and foul-smelling that burned her eyes even through her mask. Chlorine gas. A pipe must have ruptured somewhere. Turned to run back to the airlock, but she was too slow. The gas was already seeping through the gaps in her mask. Her lungs felt like they were on fire. She stumbled, fell, and hit the ground hard. Through the blur of tears and pain, she could see the cubs through the observation window. They were on their feet now, watching her. They knew something was wrong. They always knew. With the last of her strength, dragged herself to the control panel by the door. Her fingers found the emergency seal button. She had to keep the gas from reaching the cubs. She had to protect them. She pressed the button. The airlock slammed shut with a heavy clang. Then everything went dark. The cubs saw their human fall. They saw the door close between them, and they did something that no had ever done before. They screamed. It was not a hunting cry or a territorial roar. It was a sound of pure distress, high and desperate, like a child calling for its mother. Dory threw herself against the observation window, cracking the reinforced glass. Bora tore at the walls with his claws, leaving deep gouges in the metal. Simply sat and screamed, her yellow eyes fixed on its unmoving body. Alarms began to wail throughout the station. Medical teams mobilized. Security officers grabbed their weapons. In the control room, watched the chaos unfold with something close to horror. "The human is down in Enclosure 18, a technician reported. "Chlorine exposure, she's not breathing. And they're trying to break through the enclosure walls." His mandibles clicked rapidly. "Send sedation teams. We need to contain those creatures before." "Wait," interrupted. "Look." On the screen, the medical team had arrived at Enclosure 18. They wore full suits as they rushed in and lifted onto a floating stretcher. Her face was pale. Her chest barely moved, but she was alive. Barely. As they carried her out, the cubs stopped their destruction. All three went completely still, their eyes tracking the stretcher as it moved through the corridor. Then Dory backed up 3 steps and launched herself at the emergency seal had closed. The metal bent. It groaned. And then it burst open like paper. The cubs did not attack the medical team. They did not attack anyone. They simply fell into formation around the stretcher, Bora in front, Dory behind, and pressed against the side, and began to move. "What are they doing?" demanded. Watched the screen with wide eyes. "They're following her. They're protecting her." The race to the ICU had begun. The corridors of Station Orion 7 had never seen anything like this. Medical officer ran beside the floating stretcher, his eyes moving between his tablet and his pale face. Her vital signs were bad, very bad. The chlorine gas had damaged her lungs, and every breath she took sounded wet and wrong. "Move faster," he ordered the stretcher. The machine hummed and increased its speed. Behind him, he could hear the sound of claws on metal. He glanced back and felt his heart nearly stop. 3 cubs were following them. Their massive bodies moved with terrible grace, their yellow eyes fixed on the stretcher. Each footstep left scratches on the floor. Each breath came out as a low rumble. "They're going to kill us," whispered one of the nurses. No, said, though he was not sure he believed it. Keep moving. Don't run. Don't make sudden movements. Just keep moving. They turned a corner into the main corridor. Alien crew members were everywhere, coming off duty, heading to meals, going about their normal lives. When they saw the normal life ended, a traitor screamed and threw himself into an emergency alcove. A group of methane breathers in environmental suits pressed themselves against the wall, their translator devices chattering in panic. A small cleaning robot tried to flee and was crushed under Bora's foot without the cub even noticing. But the cubs did not look at any of them. They did not growl or threaten or hunt. They only watched. Began to understand. These predators, these monsters that the galaxy feared, were not chasing prey. They were escorting their family. Clear the corridor, he shouted. Everyone clear the corridor now. His voice carried through the station's communication system. Ahead of them, doors opened and closed as people scrambled to get out of the way. The path to the ICU became an empty tunnel of metal and light. They passed through the botanical section, where trees from 100 worlds grew in careful rows. A gardener who had not heard the warning stepped out from behind a flowering bush and found himself face to face with Dory. The cub stopped, her lips pulled back to show teeth as long as knives, a growl built in her throat. The gardener, elderly with blue skin and trembling hands, fell to his knees. He closed all 4 of his eyes and waited to die. Dory leaned forward and sniffed him, her nose wrinkled. Then she simply stepped around him and continued following the stretcher, leaving the gardener alive and shaking on the floor. By the stars, the gardener whispered, they spared me. Why did they spare me? He would spend the rest of his life wondering. In the control room was shouting orders. His 6 legs carried him back and forth across the floor as he coordinated security teams, evacuation protocols, and emergency responses. I want tranquilizer teams at every junction, he commanded. Heavy sedatives, enough to bring down a full grown. Sir, they're just cubs, a technician pointed out. Cubs that have already broken through a reinforced emergency seal. Cubs that could tear through this entire station if they wanted to. His mandibles clicked with anger. I will not let them reach the ICU. There are other patients there, other lives at risk. The cubs haven't hurt anyone, said. She had been watching the security feeds closely. They've had dozens of chances. They walked right past people. They didn't attack. Yet, said, they haven't attacked yet. But what happens when we try to save the human? What happens when we stick needles in her, cut her open, cause her pain? Those creatures will see us as threats. They will kill everyone in that room. Did not have an answer for that. On the screen, the stretcher and its strange escort had reached the medical wing. The ICU was just ahead, a heavy door marked with the universal symbol for emergency care. Inside, doctors were preparing for survival, setting up breathing machines and mixing medications. They did not know what was coming with her. Reached the ICU door first. He placed his hand on the scanner and the door slid open. The stretcher carrying floated through, and then turned to face the cubs. Bora stood before him, blocking the doorway. The young predator's head reached his chest, and his yellow eyes stared into the human's face. Behind him, Dorian waited. You can't come in, said. His voice shook slightly, but he did not step back. I know you want to protect her, I understand, but she needs medical care. We need to help her breathe. We need to give her medicine. If you're in there, you'll get in the way. She could die. Bora tilted his head. For a moment, thought the cub might actually understand him. Then Bora simply walked forward, pushing aside like he weighed nothing. Dorian followed. The ICU staff froze. A doctor dropped his instruments. A nurse backed into a corner and began to cry quietly. 3 apex predators spread out around his bed, their claws clicking on the sterile floor, their eyes scanning every person in the room. Nobody move, said softly. Nobody make any sudden movements, let them settle. The cubs did not attack. They did not threaten. They simply positioned themselves around bed, Bora at the foot, facing the door, Dory at the head, watching the monitors, and pressed against the side, her nose touching limp hand. And then they waited. Took a deep breath. He had a choice to make. He could call for security, try to remove the cubs by force and probably get everyone in this room killed, or he could try something else. "Everyone, listen to me," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "We're going to treat our patient. We're going to move slowly and carefully. We're going to announce everything we do before we do it. And we're going to trust that these creatures understand we're trying to help." "Are you insane?" the crying nurse whispered. "Maybe," admitted, "but I don't see another option. If we don't treat her in the next few minutes, she's going to die. And I don't think any of us want to see how these cubs react to that." He walked slowly toward the bed. Bora's eyes tracked him, but the cub did not move. Reached out and checked its breathing tube, adjusting it slightly. "I'm helping her breathe," he said out loud for the cub's benefit. "See, I'm being gentle, I'm not hurting her." Dory's ears swiveled toward his voice. She watched his hands with intense focus. Continued his work, narrating every action. "Now I'm giving her medicine. It will help her lungs heal. It might sting a little, but it will make her better." He pressed the injection gun against his arm. For one terrible moment he thought Dory might leap at him, but the cub only watched, her tail twitching nervously. The medicine flowed into his veins. Her breathing eased slightly. The monitors showed a small improvement. "Good breath, good, it's working." Behind him, the other staff members slowly began to move again. They followed his example, announcing their actions, moving carefully, treating the predators as partners rather than threats. It was the strangest medical procedure any of them had ever performed, but somehow it worked. Outside the ICU, arrived with his security teams. Through the window, he could see the scene inside. Doctors working around 3 deadly predators who watched every move but did not interfere. "What is happening?" he demanded. Stood beside him, a small smile on her face. "They're saving her life, all of them together." "This is madness." "No," said, "this is what humans do. We make family out of anything, even monsters." Inside had lifted her head and placed it gently on his chest. The cub's ears were pressed flat against her skull, and her yellow eyes were half closed. If anyone else had tried to get that close to the patient, the monitors would have been blocked, the doctors would have been obstructed. But somehow knew exactly how to position herself. She was not in the way. She was simply there, offering comfort, offering warmth, offering her presence. His heartbeat steadied, and the long vigil began. 48 hours passed like slow water. The news spread through Station Orion 7 like fire. Everyone was talking about the human woman in the ICU and the 3 predators who refused to leave her side. Crew members found excuses to walk past the medical wing, hopping to catch a glimpse through the window. They saw lying still and pale on the bed, connected to machines that breathed for her. And they saw the cubs, positioned like soldiers on guard duty, watching everything. The cubs did not eat, they did not drink, they did not sleep. Had tried to bring them food on the first day. He had carried in a bucket of fresh meat, moving slowly and announcing his intentions the way he had learned to do. Bora had looked at the meat he had looked at, and then he had pushed the bucket away with his nose and returned to his position at the foot of the bed. "They won't eat while she's unconscious," reported to the council meeting that afternoon. "They won't do anything, they just wait." "This is dangerous," insisted. "Starving predators become desperate predators. The longer this continues, the greater the risk." "The risk of what?" asked. "They've been in there for 2 days. They haven't hurt anyone. They haven't even growled at anyone. The most aggressive thing they've done is block a cleaning drone from entering." "Because the human is stable," replied. "What happens when something goes wrong? What happens when the doctors need to perform emergency surgery? Those creatures will see it as an attack. They will defend her." Then we explain what we're doing, has been talking to them, and they seem to understand. They are animals. His voice rose with frustration. They do not understand. They cannot understand. They are simply waiting for an opportunity to strike. The council argued for hours. Some members wanted to force the cubs out. Others thought it was too risky. A few suggested letting nature take its course. If the cubs starved themselves, that was their choice. Rejected this idea immediately. Dead cubs would cause an even bigger problem than live ones. In the end, they decided to wait. It was not a real decision, just an admission that nobody knew what to do. Meanwhile, in the ICU, something strange was happening. His condition was improving, not quickly but steadily. Her oxygen levels were rising. Her heart was beating stronger. The damage to her lungs was healing faster than expected. Could not explain it. The treatment should have taken weeks to show results, but was getting better in days. He shared his confusion with one of the older nurses, a woman named who had worked on the station for 15 years. "It's the cubs," said quietly. "Haven't you noticed?" "Noticed what?" "The way lies on her chest. Her head is right over his heart. And listen, really listen." Listened. At first he heard only the beeping of monitors and the hissing of the breathing machine. But then, underneath those sounds, he heard something else. A low, rhythmic vibration. A purr. "Don't purr," he said. "They do now," smiled sadly. "At least this one does. And whatever frequency that sound is at, it seems to be helping's body heal. Her stress hormones are down. Her immune system is more active. It's like the cub is telling her body that she's safe, that she's protected, that she can focus on getting better." Stared at, the small predator's eyes were closed, and her body rose and fell with his breathing. She looked almost peaceful. "Has anyone recorded this?" he asked. "I've been recording everything. This is going to change what we know about both species." The third night came dark and quiet. Most of the station's crew had gone to sleep. Only the night shift remained, moving through empty corridors, checking systems, monitoring the patients in the medical wing. Had sent most of his staff home to rest. He stayed, partly because he wanted to watch over, and partly because he was fascinated by the cubs. In all his years as a medical officer, he had never seen anything like this. He sat in a chair in the corner of the ICU, pretending to read reports but actually watching the cubs. Bora had not moved from his position at the foot of the bed in over 12 hours. His muscles must be cramping. His body must be screaming for food and water. But he stayed, solid as stone, guarding his human. Dory paced slowly around the room, checking the windows, checking the door, checking every shadow. She was the oldest, the most responsible. In a normal pack, she would be learning to hunt, to kill, to survive. Instead, she was learning to protect. And had not left side for even a moment. She had climbed onto the bed despite the nurse's protests and settled herself against the unconscious woman. Her purring never stopped. "You really love her, don't you?" said softly. His ear twitched toward his voice, but she did not open her eyes. "I wonder what that feels like," he continued. "To love someone so much that you forget about everything else. Food, water, sleep. None of it matters, only she matters." He thought about his own life. His family was far away, on a planet he had not visited in years. He had friends on the station, but no one close enough to die for. No one he loved the way these cubs loved. Maybe humans were not so different from after all. Maybe everyone needed someone to protect. At 3:47 a.m., the monitors began to scream. Jumped to his feet. The screens showed oxygen levels dropping rapidly. Her heart was beating too fast, then too slow, then skipping beats entirely. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. "Medical emergency in ICU," he shouted into his communicator. "All hands respond." The cubs reacted instantly. Dory's head snapped toward the monitors, her ears flat and her teeth bared. Bora rose to his full height, blocking the doorway, his growl filling the room like thunder. Lifted her head and let out a cry, that same desperate sound she had made when first collapsed. Steam burst through the door, pushing past Bora despite his growl. They rushed to his bed, instruments in hand, ready to save her life. But Dory was waiting for them. The eldest cub stood over like a shield. Her claws were extended. Her lips were pulled back to show every terrible tooth. The message was clear: touch her and die. Move the creature, one of the doctors shouted. We can't, said. If we try to force her, she'll kill us all. Then the patient will die. Vital signs continued to fall. Her body was giving up. Without immediate treatment, she would be dead in minutes. Looked at Dory. The cub was terrified. He could see it in her eyes, in the way her tail lashed back and forth, in the trembling of her legs. She did not understand what was happening. She only knew that her human was in danger and that these strange creatures were trying to get close to her. She was doing what any good protector would do. She was defending her family. But her defense would kill the one she loved. Made a decision, it was crazy, it was stupid, it would probably get him killed. He dropped to his knees. He tilted his head back, exposing his throat, the softest, most vulnerable part of his body. And he began to speak. Knelt on the cold floor with his throat exposed and his heart beating so hard he thought it might break through his chest. Dory stood before him, a mountain of fur and muscle and teeth, close enough that he could feel her breath on his face. One bite, one swipe of her claws, that was all it would take. Behind him, his medical team stood frozen. Nobody dared to move. Nobody dared to breathe. I know you're scared, said. His voice came out shaky, but he forced himself to keep talking. I'm scared too. I'm so scared right now that I can barely think. But Dory, please listen to me, is dying. The cub's ears twitched at its name. She's dying, repeated. Not because of us, not because of anything we did. Her body is sick. The gas hurt her lungs and now her heart is struggling. If we don't help her right now, in the next few minutes, she will die. Do you understand? She will die and she will never wake up and she will never call you her baby again. Tears were running down his face now. He did not try to hide them. He did not care about looking strong or professional. All he cared about was making this creature understand. We want to save her, that's all we want. We love her too, not the way you love her maybe, not as much, but we care about her. She's our friend, she's our colleague, she's one of us, and we can't watch her die without trying to help. Dory's growl faded. Her lips slowly covered her teeth. She stared at with those yellow eyes, and for a long moment the only sound in the room was the terrible beeping of the monitor's warning that time was running out. Then slowly, impossibly, Dory stepped aside. Did not waste a single second. He leaped to his feet and rushed to his bed, his team following close behind. They worked with desperate speed, injecting medication, adjusting the breathing machine, shocking her heart when it stopped beating entirely. The cubs watched everything. Bora had left his position at the door and moved closer, his eyes fixed on the doctor's hands. Every injection made him tense. Every touch made him lean forward. But he did not attack. He simply watched, trusting these strange creatures to save his human. Had pressed herself against the side of the bed, her body shaking. She made small whimpering sounds that no predator should be able to make. It was the sound of a child watching her mother fight for life. Her heart is back, one of the doctors announced, weak but steady. Oxygen levels still dropping, another replied. Her lungs are filled with fluid, we need to drain them. Do it, ordered. They inserted a tube into his chest. The procedure was invasive, painful, potentially frightening to watch. Held his breath, waiting for the cubs to react. Dory's head tilted as she watched the tube slide into his body. Bora's claws extended slightly, scratching against the floor, but neither of them moved to interfere. They had made their choice. They had decided to trust. Fluid began to drain from his lungs. dark and bloody, filled with the damage the chlorine gas had caused. As it flowed out, her breathing improved. Her oxygen levels began to rise. "It's working," breathed. "It's actually working." The crisis continued for another hour. His body fought hard, nearly giving up twice more before finally stabilizing. By the time the sun would have risen on any planet with a sun, she was out of immediate danger. Collapsed into a chair, exhausted beyond words. His team cleaned up their instruments and checked the monitors one more time. The nurses changed sheets and adjusted her pillows, working carefully around, who had returned to her position on the bed. "That was incredible," said softly. "What you did, how did you know it would work?" "I didn't," admitted. I thought about what I would want if I were them. If someone I loved was dying and strangers were trying to get close to her, I would want to be told the truth. I would want to be treated with respect. I would want someone to acknowledge my fear and my pain." "You treated them like people." "Because I think they are people, not human people, but people, beings with thoughts and feelings and the ability to love." He looked at Dory, who had settled down near the window, her eyes half closed but still alert. That cub made a choice tonight. She was terrified and every instinct told her to protect at all costs, but she listened. She understood, and she chose to trust us. The xenobiology journals are going to lose their minds over this. Laughed tiredly. Let them. Right now I'm just glad everyone is alive. In the control room, watched the security footage with something close to shock. He had been certain that the night would end in blood. He had prepared evacuation orders, warning notices, even a containment protocol in case the cubs went on a rampage after his death. None of it had been needed. Stood beside him, her arms crossed, a satisfied expression on her face. Still think they're just mindless predators. Did not answer immediately. His brain struggled to process what he had seen. The cubs had every reason to attack. They had every instinct screaming at them to defend their human, but they had held back. They had listened. They had chosen. "How?" he finally asked. "How did the human doctor know that would work?" He didn't know, said. He hoped. He took a risk based on what he believed about those creatures, and his belief turned out to be right. That is not a logical approach to dangerous animals. No, it's not. It's a human approach. Turned to look at him with eyes that held both sadness and pride. We don't always make sense. We do things that seem stupid and risky and irrational. We reach out to creatures that could kill us. We offer trust when we have no reason to expect it will be returned. And sometimes, just sometimes, that crazy human faith is rewarded. His mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You are a very strange species." "Yes," agreed. "We are. But that strangeness has kept those cubs calm for 3 days. That strangeness convinced a terrified predator to step aside and let doctors save her human. And that strangeness might just change how the entire galaxy thinks about both humans and—" She smiled and walked away, leaving alone with his thoughts and the security footage that would soon be seen by billions across the known universe. Back in the ICU, the night shift was ending. The morning crew arrived, receiving briefings about the crisis and the cubs and the miracle of survival. Everyone moved carefully, speaking softly, respecting the predators who had become unexpected partners in healing. Should have gone home to sleep. He was exhausted, running on nothing but determination and cold coffee, but he could not bring himself to leave. Instead, he sat in his corner chair and watched as began to purr again. The small predator had pressed herself even closer too, her massive head resting on the human's chest, her yellow eyes finally closing in something like peace. The monitors showed stable vital signs, strong heartbeat, healthy oxygen levels, normal brain activity. Was going to live. And for the first time in 3 days, allowed himself to believe it. 1 week after the accident, opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was gray fur. Lots of gray fur very close to her face. She blinked, confused, her mind moving slowly like a ship through thick fog. Where was she? What had happened? Why was everything so bright and strange? Then the fur moved, and a massive head lifted up, and two yellow eyes stared into hers from inches away. Yep. Memory came flooding back. The maintenance alert, the chlorine gas, the desperate race to seal the door before the cubs were exposed, and then darkness, so much darkness. Whispered. Her voice was rough and broken, her throat raw from the tubes that had kept her alive. But she managed to lift one weak hand and place it on the cub's nose. His reaction was immediate. The young predator let out a cry of pure joy, a sound that should not have been possible from such a deadly creature, and began to lick his face with her rough tongue. Her tail wagged so hard that it knocked over a medical cart, sending instruments clattering to the floor. "She's awake," someone shouted. "The patient is awake." Suddenly the room was full of people, doctors checking monitors, nurses adjusting equipment. Rushing in with his tablet, his tired face breaking into a smile when he saw us open eyes. But barely noticed any of them. Her attention was fixed on the cubs. Bora had appeared at the side of her bed, his yellow eyes soft with relief. He pushed his head under her free hand, demanding attention, practically vibrating with happiness. And Dory, calm, careful Dory, had tears running down her face, had not known that could cry. "My brave bobbies," she whispered. "My good, brave bobbies." She did not know what had happened while she was unconscious. She did not know about the chase through the station, the standoff in the ICU, the long nights of watching and waiting. She did not know that her cubs had refused to eat or drink or sleep for 3 days. She did not know that they had nearly killed a room full of doctors before deciding to trust instead. But she could feel it. She could feel the fear and the love and the desperate need to protect that radiated from each of them. They had been so scared, so terribly, terribly scared. "I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her own face now. "I'm so sorry I scared you. I should have been more careful. I should have called engineering instead of checking that room myself. I was stupid, and you all suffered because of it." Made a small protesting sound and licked her face again. It was the closest it could come to saying, "Shut up and let us love you." The news spread across the station within minutes. The human was awake. The human was going to survive. The vigil was finally over. In the control room, received the report with a mixture of relief and something he did not quite recognize. He had spent the past week expecting tragedy. He had prepared for death, for violence, for the terrible mess that would follow when those predators finally snapped. Instead, he was watching footage of 3 deadly creatures crying with happiness because their human had opened her eyes. "I do not understand," he said to no one in particular. "I do not understand any of this." Appeared beside him as she always seemed to do. "What don't you understand?" "Everything." His mandibles clicked rapidly. Those creatures should have killed someone by now. They were stressed, starving, exhausted. Every instinct should have told them to lash out, but they didn't. They just waited and loved and trusted. "Yes," agreed, "they did." "How is that possible? They are predators, apex killers, the most dangerous species in the known galaxy." "They were dangerous," corrected. Before a small human woman decided to treat them like children instead of monsters. She changed them, not through training or conditioning or force, through love. Love is not a scientific method. "No, it's not, but it works." She gestured at the screen, where the cubs were still crowded around his bed, refusing to let her out of their sight for even a moment. "Look at them. Really look. Those aren't predators waiting for an opportunity to strike. Those are children who almost lost their mother and are terrified it might happen again." Looked. He saw Dory pressing her head against shoulder. He saw Bora lying across the foot of the bed, his tail wrapped protectively around her legs. He saw, still purring, still crying, still refusing to move from her human side. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "I have misjudged the situation." Perhaps, agreed with a small smile. The footage from Station Orion 7 reached the Galactic Networks 2 days later. Someone had leaked it. Maybe a crew member looking for fame. Maybe a journalist who had heard rumors. Maybe just a person who thought the universe needed to see something beautiful for once. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Species that had feared them for thousands of years watched in amazement as these perfect killers nuzzled against a frail human woman. They saw the desperate chase through the corridors. They saw the standoff in the ICU. They saw kneeling with his throat exposed, speaking to a predator like she was a person. And they saw the cubs' vigil. 3 days of watching and waiting, refusing to eat or drink, staying by their human side through every crisis. The comments and messages flooded in from across the galaxy. "How is this possible?" asked a senator who had supported the extermination of all. "They're beautiful," wrote a methane breather child from the outer colonies. "Can I have a human to love me like that?" "We were wrong," admitted a scientist who had spent his career studying predator species. "We looked at their teeth and their claws and we thought we understood them. We didn't understand anything." And from the Human Federation, a simple statement that would be quoted for generations. "This is what we do. We reach out. We connect. We find family in the strangest places. It is our greatest weakness and our greatest strength." 3 weeks after the accident, was finally discharged from the ICU. She was still weak. Her lungs would take months to fully heal, and she tired easily. The doctors wanted her to return to the human quarters, where she could rest comfortably under proper medical supervision. Refused. "I'm going back to enclosure 17, she said firmly. "That's where my family is." Tried to argue, tried to reason with her. Even in his awkward way expressed concern for her health, but would not be moved. "Those cubs stayed with me for 3 days without food or water," she said. "They nearly killed themselves trying to protect me. The least I can do is go home to them." In the end, they brought a wheelchair. Was too weak to walk that far, but she was not too weak to be stubborn. The journey through the station was like a parade. Crew members lined the corridors, watching in silence as was wheeled past. Some of them reached out to touch her hand or whisper words of gratitude. Others simply nodded in respect. The cubs walked beside her in their familiar formation. Bora in front, clearing the path with his massive presence. Dory behind, watching for any threat from the rear. And pressed against the wheelchair, her head resting on its lap, purring softly. They reached enclosure 17 just as the station's artificial lights were dimming toward evening. The door opened, and the familiar smell of the cubs' home washed over fur and meat and earth, and something warm that could only be described as love. Stood at the entrance, watching as wheelchair rolled inside. The cubs immediately began to arrange their sleeping area, dragging blankets and cushions into a pile, creating a nest for their human. "Are you sure about this?" asked one last time. Looked around at the enclosure that had become her home. She looked at Dory, already settling into her guardian position near the door. She looked at Bora, checking every corner for danger even though there was none. She looked at, who had not stopped touching her for even a moment since she woke up. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. Smiled and stepped back. "Then I'll leave you to your family. Call if you need anything." "I will." The door closed. The enclosure grew quiet except for the soft sounds of 3 predators breathing and one human heart beating strong. Let help her from the wheelchair to the nest of blankets. It was not the most comfortable bed she had ever had, but it felt like heaven. Dory lay down on her left, Bora on her right, and curled up at her feet. "I missed you," whispered. "I know I was asleep, but somehow I still missed you." Made a soft sound of agreement. Outside the enclosure, the galaxy continued to spin. The story of the human woman and her predator cubs spread to more and more worlds. Scientists debated the implications. Politicians argued about what it meant for human-alien relations. Philosophers wondered if love could truly tame the wildest hearts. But inside Enclosure 17, none of that mattered. A small human woman lay surrounded by three of the most dangerous creatures in the known universe. They had chosen her. They had protected her. They had nearly died for her. And she had done the same for them. That was what family meant. Not blood or species or logic, just love freely given and fully returned. Closed her eyes and smiled. She was home,